The dead tug sat exactly where the broker said it would, which was how Daro Fox knew the broker was lying about something else. 8 kilometers off the bow, the wreck floated in a dark pocket past the maintained lane, running lights cold, hull profile flat against the starfield. No tumble, no drift error. Daro Fox stood on the bridge of the second notice with his arms folded, watching the screen with the patient anger of a man being asked to believe a ghost story written by an accountant. That, Kela T'Rathi said from the pilot's chair, is dust cut. A wreck being where it's supposed to be? A wreck that's still there. She tapped 2 fingers across the console, her tendrils tight against her shoulders the way they got when she was already plotting her exit angle. Coordinates that good? Off a broker? Somebody should have already pulled it, stripped it, filed against it, something. OPS-9 stood by the systems rail, optics flickering through scan layers with all the urgency of a clerk reading the same form for the 11th time. The vessel transmits no active distress pattern, no heat bloom, no crew beacon, no open claim marker. There is no legal reason to distrust it. Then distrust it for illegal reasons. Nuvei Crana's voice cut in from engineering. Daro glanced at the ceiling speaker. You listening to bridge chatter again? I am always listening when the ship is 8 kilometers from being my problem. Daro almost smiled. Wyatt Slayton stood by the aft hatch, half-suited, helmet under one arm, watching the screen with the still attention of a man who had boarded too many wrecks to expect an empty corridor. Cara Ferro sat at the side station, her ocular augments throwing a soft pale flicker across the biosignature feed. No bodies, she said. No fresh heat, no venting. Her ocular flicker shifted. Second pass running on the lock data. Outer locks cycled in the last 12 hours. Kela turned slightly. 12 hours. The broker said it had been dead for 9 cycles. The broker, Daro thought, had said a lot of things. Low-risk infrastructure retrieval. Uncrewed tug. Recover black box. Recover sealed cargo cradle. No questions required. In Daro's experience, no questions required meant the questions had already been answered in a way nobody wanted on the record. Then the tug woke up. One narrow amber maintenance beacon stuttered along its dorsal spine, and the bridge speakers crackled with a voice flattened by old compression. Receiving contact detected. Handoff overdue. Maintenance backlog transfer pending. Daro closed his eyes. Kela's grin landed somewhere between delighted and offended. It thinks we work for it. Correction, Oppie said. It thinks we arrived for handoff. Engineering came back over shipcom, lower this time. Daro. I know. No, you don't. The tug just tried to push a handoff through the aft grid. I'm isolating the bridge now. Hold on. Through the comm, a panel cover hit the deck. Nuvei was already moving. Oppie, help her. Already engaged. I'm refusing the handoff at 3 protocol layers. Is it working? It is slowing. Daro turned toward the screen. Define handoff. Fast version. Oppie answered without breaking from whatever he was doing. The tug has identified the second notice as a receiving contact. It is attempting to attach unresolved maintenance history, penalty notes, and service obligations to our registry buffer. How bad? A pause followed. He could hear Nuvei breathing through the comm, working fast enough that something metal rattled near her mic. Glass me. Daro's jaw tightened. Fast version. 5,134 unresolved service entries, Oppie said, some tied to incident liability, patch authorization failures, penalty notes, and 1 unresolved environmental complaint. Frack me, Kela said softly. Nuvei came back, breathless. I've got the aft grid isolated. Ping is contained, but Daro, it already wrote a partial contact entry into our registry buffer before I cut the bridge. Can we scrub it? Not cleanly, Nuvei said. Not from here. I can wipe working data, but sealed registry buffers are built to notice when you take a hammer to them. A hard scrub would likely create a tamper flag at any port that still compares compliance records, Oppie added. Kela looked at the dead tug on the screen. So we touched a dead ship, and now it wants us to pay its bills. Accurate enough, Oppie agreed. On the feed, 1 old docking indicator blinked inside the tug's open service collar. Daro stared at it. Right, he said. Suit up. The repair list had landed in Daro's slate 6 hours earlier. The second notice needed a regulator, 3 pressure seals, 2 port-side coolant couplers, an inspection delay, and a docking authority clerk willing to believe Nuvei's last repair report had been written in good faith. 2 of those things were available for credits. The other 3 required a job. Nuvei had been very clear about the regulator. She'd said her piece in the mess, standing on the bench because the table was the only way for a Miravaki to glare across it without losing the high ground. If we run the port drive without replacement, she said, the engine will not explode. Daro waited. Her tail flicked once, sharp. It will first become rude, then expensive, then religious. Kela looked up from her ration tray. Religious how? It will pray for death. Wyatt nodded into his cup. Bad stage. The engineer's metaphor is inefficient but structurally accurate, Oppie added from the end of the bench. Nuvei pointed one claw at Daro. The ship needs a regulator. I'm aware. Then act like a captain and get us what we need. The contract pinged Daro's slate 2 minutes after that. He read it 3 times. Once for tone, once for omission, once because the first 2 passes hadn't found the lie. The third pass hadn't found it either, which made him nervous in a way the first 2 hadn't. He pushed it to the mess display. Independent broker. No named client. Glasswake relay escrow, small launch retainer on departure, main payment on delivery. Retrieval license, valid in 3 jurisdictions, questionable in 4, irrelevant in the dead pocket where the work actually was. Dead maintenance tug, designation, Cobalt Wren, no active recovery marker. Recover black box, recover sealed cargo cradle, deliver both, unopened, to a dockside agent at Glasswake Station. No hazard premium. That started the argument. No hazard premium means hidden hazard, Kela said. Or the broker is cheap, she added. Cara pulled the manifest into her overlay and watched it for a long time before speaking. The tug's registry is partial. How partial? Enough to exist if a lazy clerk checks it. Not enough for a clerk who doesn't regret their life choices. Oppie processed that, the way he processed most organic phrasings, with a small flicker, as if filing a footnote. Statistically, clerks who regret their choices prefer to make others regret theirs. Wyatt huffed once into his cup. Nuvei pointed one claw at the mess display. Take it. Nuvei, take it. The regulator isn't a maintenance issue anymore, Daro. Every time we run the port drive without it, we are chewing life off the engine. Wyatt looked at the file once, the way he looked at everything, slowly, without a tell. Dead tug, off-lane, cargo cradle. Could be worse. It could always be worse. Daro thumbed the contract. We take it. Black box, cradle, leave. No heroics, no salvage expansion, no unlisted cargo, no side claims. Kela raised one hand. No side claims unless they're very good. No. Define very good. No. Wyatt drained his cup. Simple job then. 6 hours later, the tug was where it was supposed to be. Wyatt was at the lock, half-suited, and Daro was already regretting the contract. Wyatt crossed the lock first. The transfer tunnel between the second notice and the tug flexed around him with every pressure adjustment. It was rated for this kind of work, technically, but rated was one of those words that only sounded comforting to people who had never watched a seal fail. Cara followed 2 meters behind him with the black box needle case locked to her hip and one utility drone riding silent above her left shoulder. The tug's inner hatch opened before Wyatt touched the manual release. He stopped. Cara stopped behind him. On the bridge of the second notice, Daro saw both suit feeds freeze at once. Problem? He asked. Wyatt tilted his helmet light into the open hatch. It opened for us. Kela made a quiet noise from the pilot's chair. That's never good. No, it's not, Daro said. Wyatt, move slow. Don't answer anything it asks you. The tug's old speaker system crackled. Receiving vessel detected. Handoff credential, active. Crew roster unavailable. Mapping active contacts. Wyatt stared into the dark corridor beyond the hatch. Daro, he said, the dead tug thinks we work here. Oppie stood at the system's rail, one hand plugged into the shipboard interface. His optics flickered through layers of old maintenance protocol and newer interference. I should clarify, he said. Verbal responses may not be required. Proximity, suit telemetry, tool activation, or continued presence may be interpreted as procedural cooperation. Wyatt stepped into the tug. "Good," he said. "I was worried this would be easy." The corridor beyond the hatch had not been left to rot. Someone had worked through it recently and fast. Tool lockers hung open. Wall panels had been removed and stacked against the deck instead of drifting loose. Several local sensor nodes had been pulled from the walls, leaving empty housings and cut leads behind. Whoever boarded before them had not been stripping at random. Cara's drone slid forward and painted the corridor in a thin sweep of light. Dust shifted in the air. There were boot marks. Cara crouched and held her scanner close to the deck. "Outer lock cycle was not a false reading," she said. "Someone boarded recently. Heavy boots, 2 individuals, maybe 3. They moved toward aft cargo and recorder access." "Scavengers?" Daro asked. "Maybe." Wyatt looked down the corridor. "Scavengers don't usually leave a recorder shield and sealed cargo cradle behind." "No, they don't." The tug spoke again. "Contact delay noted. Please report cause of delay for regulatory continuation." Wyatt kept walking. The voice waited 3 seconds. "Cause of delay not reported. Cause provisionally categorized as negligence." Kela leaned toward her console. "I know it's a machine, but I already dislike its management style." Nuvei's voice came over shipcom from engineering, half buried under the sound of a panel being forced open. "If that thing files negligence against us, I am putting it through a recycler. You have to board it first," Kela replied. "I can hate things remotely." Wyatt reached the first pressure door and stopped beside the manual wheel. The door was already unlocked. That bothered him more than if it had been sealed. Cara scanned the frame. No trap on the door. Wyatt looked at her. "Okay, no obvious traps," she amended. He turned the wheel and eased the door open. Beyond it, the central maintenance compartment sat in low amber light. The old console banks were dead, except for one status panel that still had power. Its display kept refreshing the same line. "Handoff overdue. Receiving contact. Pending." Cara sent the drone through a side hatch into the tug's cramped control space. A moment later, her voice came over comms. "Navigation archive is gone." Daro watched the feed. "Figures." "Beacon core 2, Cara said. "Pulled out of the housing." Wyatt looked back at the empty sensor nodes along the corridor. "They didn't just strip it, they blinded it." Cara's drone light moved over the gutted console space and made sure it couldn't tell us who boarded. Daro read the status display through Wyatt's feed. "Oppie," he said, "how does it know we're receiving contact?" "I found what triggered it," Oppie said. "The contract packet carried a handoff code inside the cargo authorization." Daro went still. Kela turned in her chair. "A what?" "Something," the tug accepted as permission to start its handoff routine. Nuvei's voice sharpened. "So we brought the thing that made it wake up?" "Yes." Daro looked at Oppie. "Can you delete it?" "From our copy of the contract packet, yes," Oppie said. "From the tug's handoff routine, no. It already accepted the code." Daro looked at the tug on the forward screen. Of course it was a setup. Cara had reached the recorder shield. She ran one gloved hand along the casing without touching the active latch. "The retrieval was the part they knew we'd accept," she said. The tug's speaker clicked again. "Crew roster unavailable. Mapping active contacts by registry touch." Kela sat back. "Wonderful. External command traffic detected. Command authority provisional." Daro closed his eyes for half a second. "External helm input logged. Docking approach outside service corridor tolerance." Kela pointed at the screen. "That approach kept your antique collar from chewing our hull. Unauthorized aft grid isolation logged. Maintenance refusal pending." Nuvei hissed over shipcom. "Say that again when I am inside you with tools." "Interior suit telemetry detected. Field contact provisional." Wyatt looked up at the nearest speaker. "I walked in 30 seconds ago. Recorder access kit detected. Data contact pending." Cara did not look away from the recorder shield. "It is very thorough for something everyone abandoned." Oppie's optics brightened, then dimmed. "Synthetic interface detected. Classification table obsolete. Unit status unresolved." Daro looked at Oppie. Oppie was silent for one beat too long. "Unresolved?" Daro asked. The tug's archive predates several synthetic personhood statutes, Oppie said. It is trying to decide whether I am crew, cargo, equipment, or a maintenance tool with opinions. Kela's expression flattened. So, it thinks you're equipment. It is considering several insulting options. Nuvei made a low, offended sound from engineering. Nobody inventories Oppie except me. Oppie turned his head slightly toward the ceiling speaker. I am interpreting that as defensive crew behavior. Interpret it as ownership of the problem, Nuvei snapped. You are my annoying chassis to fix. Wyatt reached the cargo cradle in aft maintenance 6 minutes later. Cara's external pass from the second notice had found the cradle's mass from outside, but the tug's gutted internal sensors and old shielding had kept her from reading condition, contents, or tampering. Now Wyatt could see it clearly. It sat bolted to the deck under 2 dead lamps and 1 working camera. The hazard striping around it was old, but the bolts were not. Someone had removed the cradle, opened the base, put it back, and tightened everything in a hurry. Wyatt knelt beside it. Cradle's been reset. Cara looked over from the recorder station through the drone feed. Recent? 12 hours fits. Daro watched the feed from the bridge. The cradle was small enough to move with a lift rig, but too heavy to carry by hand. Its label read scrap calibration waste, which was exactly the kind of label people used when they wanted a lazy inspector to stop reading. Don't open it yet, Daro said. Wyatt looked at the bolts. Wasn't planning to. I like having hands. Cara seated her first probe into the recorder shield. The tug went quiet. That was worse than the talking. Cara, Daro said. I know. She inserted the second probe. The shield accepted it with a hard little click. The maintenance panel in front of Wyatt came alive. Recorder access initiated. Handoff confirmation required. The cradle unlocked from the deck. Wyatt did not move. Daro, I see it. The tug's speaker came back louder. Receiving contact acknowledged by data access. Backlog transfer resuming. Oppie's hand tightened against the interface rail. It is pushing the handoff again. Before Daro could answer, the bridge display flashed with a new warning. Outbound signal detected. Legacy route packet. Vessel identifier attached. Kela sat forward. Frack! Oppie's optics flickered hard. The tug is attaching our ship ID to the packet. Name, transponder, docking link, and enough data to show we were here. Jam it, Daro said. I am. The signal graph fractured across the display as Oppie buried the tug's transmission under static, false routing noise, and 3 different refusal protocols. For half a second, it looked blocked. Then a thin red line punched through before collapsing. Oppie went still. Daro noticed. He paused when a bad result had finished becoming certain. How much got out? Daro asked. Not enough for a complete transfer, Oppie said. Enough to prove contact. Nuvei swore from engineering. There goes Plan Z. Kela glanced toward the speaker. Plan Z? Total wipe, Nuvei said. Kill every non-essential system, sit dead in 0G for a rotation while I reload the ship from cold backups and pretend none of this ever touched us. That sounds relaxing. It was my happy thought. Oppie's voice stayed calm. A full scrub now would remove our local working copy, but not the leaked route packet. Any legitimate port comparing external registry traffic against our wiped compliance buffer would flag the ship for tampering. Wyatt rested one hand on the cradle's lift hook. So, we can't leave it, and we can't delete it. Cara answered before Daro could. If we leave now, someone has a packet saying the tug activated when we docked. If we wipe our side, every port that checks registry law sees a gap and asks why. Daro looked at the dead tug on the screen. The tug already had their ship's name in its record. The broker still had the real payment. The second notice already had too many unpaid obligations for Daro to leave with nothing but another one. Cara, pull the recorder. Wyatt, rig the cradle. Oppie, keep the handoff from completing. Nuvei, burn anything that tries to make us responsible for somebody else's ancient service backlog. Nuvei's answer came with the sound of a cutter starting up. With pleasure. Cara pulled the first layer of recorder data while Wyatt fixed the lift sling to the cradle. Most of it was old maintenance noise, service entries, gate patch recalibration notes, route warnings, and handoff attempts that had been bouncing through dead systems for longer than anyone aboard wanted to think about. One file had changed when the second notice docked. Cara isolated it and sent it to the bridge. The audio was damaged. The voice underneath was synthetic, old, and flat from compression. Cold route segment 9, gate patch K19, maintenance handoff failed. Receiving crew not present. Infrastructure status unresolved. Handoff condition pending. Kela stared at the transcript as it crawled across her console. That doesn't sound like a tug log. It isn't, Cara said. It's root infrastructure. Oppie processed the recovered file. The tug was carrying a ledger fragment. Daro looked at the transcript. Cold root wasn't in the contract. Cara pulled another damaged line from the recorder. Cold root ledger. Daro looked at the contract packet again. Either way, someone wanted this thing activated. On the tug, the maintenance voice cut through every channel at once. Backlog transfer delayed by incomplete environmental complaint. Receiving contact required to resolve outstanding issue before final acceptance. Daro looked at Oppie. Oppie's optics held steady. I may have introduced a procedural obstruction. Kela looked at him with sudden appreciation. What did you do? The tug cannot legally complete the handoff while a prior complaint remains unaddressed. What complaint? Galley odor. Buried in the same backlog. No resolution statement. Kela blinked. You saved us with ancient kitchen stink? I delayed us with ancient kitchen stink, Oppie said. Precision matters. Nuvei barked a short laugh through the comm. I take back one bad thing I said about you. You have said many. 1. The tug considered the problem for 3 seconds. Environmental complaint remains active. Receiving crew must inspect galley odor before handoff completion. Wyatt stood beside the cradle with the lift sling in both hands. Please tell me we are not checking the galley. Daro watched the timer Oppie had thrown onto the bridge display. The handoff completion had stopped at 71%, but the tug was already trying to route around the obstruction. We are not checking the galley. The tug speaker clicked. Failure to inspect may result in negligence finding. Kela leaned toward the comm. Add it to the pile. Oppie looked at her. Do not encourage it. Cara pulled the black box free. The recorder shield released with a dry metal clack. The moment the case came loose, every amber light in the tug switched to red. Unauthorized removal of active route ledger component. Wyatt exhaled. There it is. Security response unavailable, the tug announced. Maintenance response available. From the ceiling above Wyatt, a service crawler unfolded on 6 thin legs. It was not a weapon. It had no cutter, no gun, and no obvious reason to scare anyone. Then it extended a compliance tagger. Wyatt took one step back. What does that thing do? Oppie answered. It appears to mark unregistered personnel for payroll correction. Kela stared at the feed. This thing is seriously trying to dock his pay? Correction. First, it will add him to payroll. Then it will dock his pay for non-compliance. Kela couldn't help but laugh. Legacy maintenance systems often used physical tags to assign deferred duty. Wyatt drew his sidearm. If that thing puts me on payroll, I'm shooting it. Daro said, Don't shoot the payroll machine unless it touches you. The crawler dropped from the ceiling. Wyatt shot it. The tagger sparked, spun, and crashed onto the deck at his feet. Daro watched the feed. I said, unless it touches you. It entered payroll range, Wyatt said. Cara didn't look up from sealing the black box in its recorder case. How much do you think it was going to dock us? Wyatt kept his sidearm trained on the broken crawler. Frack, if I was waiting to find out. The tug opened 2 more ceiling panels. Wyatt looked up. If you really need to know, you can make friends with those 2. Daro's voice sharpened over the boarding channel. Wyatt, Cara, move. Wyatt kicked the broken crawler aside and dragged the cradle toward the corridor. The lift sling whined under the weight. Cara stayed close behind him, the black box sealed in its recorder case and locked tight against her chest, drone pivoting to watch the ceiling. In engineering aboard the second notice, Nuvei had both arms inside the aft grid cabinet. Her tail was braced around a pipe, ears flattened, eyes narrowed against the warning strobe she had not had time to disable. The handoff code was still active, jammed into the registry buffer like some dust-cut dock clerk had welded paperwork to her ship. It was riding a cheap bridge between the contract packet and the aft registry buffer. the kind of shortcut used for routine cargo confirmations. It was not built for a dead tug trying to hand them its backlog. Either way, it was using her ship. Nuvei set her cutter against the bridge housing and smiled with all her teeth. "There you are. Oppie," she said, "I need the tug to stop touching the aft grid." "I have asked. Ask harder. I have issued 16 refusals, 3 regulatory objections, 2 historic incompatibility notices, and 1 complaint about galley odor." "Then threaten it. I do not think the tug values fear." "Then bore it." Oppie paused. "That may be viable." On the bridge, Daro saw Oppie open a maintenance dispute file large enough to make the system rail stutter. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." Filing a procedural challenge. "You think it'll work? Against a modern system, probably not. Against this tug, possibly long enough." The tug's voice changed pitch. "Administrative challenge received. Please define complaint category." Oppie answered in the same calm tone he used for pressure failures in food inventory. Category 1, improper receiving contact identification. Category 2, outdated synthetic classification. Category 3, unresolved environmental complaint. Category 4, attempted liability transfer without mutual acknowledgement. Category 5, galley stink. Kela glanced at him. "You listed the stink twice. It has emotional weight." The tug went silent again. Nuvei drove the cutter through the relay bridge. The bridge lights dipped. The aft grid barked a warning. Kela grabbed the controls as the second notice drifted half a meter closer to the tug. Daro braced against the back of the pilot chair. "Kela!" "I see it." The docking collar groaned as the tug pulled against the lock. Kela adjusted the burn by a fraction and dragged the second notice back into alignment. There. Wyatt and Cara reached the transfer tunnel with the cradle between them and the black box locked against Cara's chest. Behind them, 2 service crawlers skittered down the corridor, taggers extended, red lamps blinking in time with the tug's complaint cycle. Wyatt shoved the cradle into the lock. The lift sling jammed. "Of course," he said. Cara dropped beside the cradle and scanned the coupling. The tug locked the sling under cargo custody. "Can you break it?" "Yes." "Fast?" "No." Wyatt looked back. The first crawler rounded the corner. He lifted his sidearm. Daro watched the feed and made the call. "Kela, pull us back 20 centimeters." Kela didn't hesitate. Her hands moved. The second notice eased away from the tug. The transfer tunnel stretched. The jammed sling dragged tight. Metal screamed. Wyatt grabbed the cradle with both hands and braced his boots. "Again," he said. Kela pulled another 10 centimeters. The sling tore free. The cradle slammed forward into the lock hard enough to dent the inner frame. Wyatt caught the edge before it clipped Cara's leg. The first service crawler reached the hatch. Cara fired a disruptor pulse from her med harness. The crawler seized, tagged the wall by accident, and dropped. The tug announced, "Wall panel assigned temporary payroll status." Wyatt stared at the tagged wall. "I hate this ship." Cara sealed the inner hatch. "It probably hates us more." The second notice broke contact with the tug 32 seconds later. Kela did it hard and fast, but well enough, which meant nobody died, and Nuvei would complain about the clamp until the next thing broke. The dead tug drifted off their starboard side with its red maintenance light still pulsing. The physical link was gone, but the damage was already done. Oppie brought the last outbound burst up on the bridge screen. Cold route segment 9. Handoff interrupted. External recovery contact identified. The second notice. Status. Receiving crew pending. Daro read it twice. "Can you bury it?" Oppie did not answer quickly enough. Daro turned toward him. "The live transmission is suppressed," Oppie answered. "This is the burst that left before we broke contact." "How much?" Wyatt asked from the recovery bay. "Enough to put us in the record. Segment marker, ship name, pending receiving status." Nuvei came up from engineering breathing hard, fur ruffled, tool harness half open, one ear damper hanging loose. "I cut the bridge," she said. Kela leaned back in her chair. "So, we are liable?" Oppie's optics flickered. "Not fully. Do not say not fully. We are not fully liable." Kela closed her eyes. Nuvei's voice stayed sharp. "Named is enough to get stopped at a port. Archives don't need the whole story. They need a ship name and an open problem." Cara entered the bridge with the black box sealed in its recorder case under one arm. The handoff record changed after we docked, she said. It has a receiving contact now. Daro looked at the packet still glowing on the screen. Us, he said. Cara sent the recovered line from the black box to the bridge display. Cold route segment 9. Gate patch K19. Infrastructure status unresolved. Handoff condition pending. Wyatt's voice came over calm from the bay. The cradle is secure. Open it, Daro said. Thought you said not to. That was before the tug tried to make us employees. Wyatt opened the cradle under Cara's remote scan. It scanned clear for explosives, active power, life signs, and eidolon traces. Inside sat a corroded gate patch calibration key, roughly the length of Wyatt's forearm, locked in a padded frame that had been added recently. The key looked worthless until you knew what it opened. Cara scanned it from the bridge feed. There's a route mark under the corrosion, she said. K19. Daro looked toward the recorder case under her arm. Same as the black box? Yes. Kela looked at the dark tug shrinking on the screen. So, someone wanted the black box and the key in the same room. Maybe, Cara replied. Wyatt stepped onto the bridge. That clears up nothing. No, Daro said. It clears up enough. Oppie brought up the contract packet and highlighted the handoff code inside the cargo authorization. The contract packet woke the tug, he said. After that, the tug followed its own routine. It named us, attached our ship to the handoff, and sent a packet before I could fully stop it. Wyatt looked at the screen. Why? Oppie's optics flickered once. Unknown. Kela leaned back in the pilot's chair. That is not an answer. It is the only accurate one, Cara said. The black box has route data. The key has the same K19 mark. That does not tell us what the job was really for. Nuvei climbed into the nearest jump seat, still breathing hard from the aft grid crawl space. Can we throw it back? The key? Kela asked. The job. Daro almost smiled. Cara looked at the recovered log again. There are more route markers past K19. Most are degraded. Anything useful? Daro asked. Not yet. Daro pointed toward the recorder case. We keep a copy. We keep the key sealed. We don't deliver anything until we know what they got us into. Wyatt looked at him. That means no full pay. It means no blind handoff. Nuvei's tail flicked once. The regulator still costs credits. I know, knowing is not purchasing. Daro looked at the screen where Glasswick Station's return vector waited in the navigation queue. Oppie, send the broker relay a notice. Black box recovered. Cargo cradle recovered. Delivery suspended because the contract carried a handoff code that put our ship into the tug's record. Kela turned from the pilot station. You think whoever posted this knew we'd find the code? Probably hoped we wouldn't. It was buried inside the cargo authorization, Oppie said. Hard to notice before it caused a problem. Daro looked toward the cargo bay feed, where the sealed cradle sat locked to the deck. It caused a problem. Just send it. Sent. 2 careful burns later, the second notice was back in a lower ring berth at Glasswick, running on borrowed patience and a port drive Nuvei no longer trusted. The cradle was sealed. The black box was isolated. Oppie's notice had been sitting in the broker relay since they left the tug. The relay answered after they docked. It returned a receipt code, a dead address, and a return path that no longer existed. Kela stared at the bridge display. Figures. Daro kept looking at the dead address. They cut and ran before delivery. Oppie ran the trace again. The result didn't improve. The contact node was disposable. It accepted the notice, then collapsed the route behind it. Wyatt stood near the cargo bay feed. Behind him, the sealed cradle sat clamped to the deck where Nuvei had insisted it couldn't roll, leak, activate, or file anything. Kela leaned back in the pilot's chair. Good. I was worried this would get less irritating. Daro closed the relay channel. What about escrow? Oppie checked the Glasswick contract channel. The main payment has been frozen. Nuvei's voice came from engineering before anyone else could react. Of course it has. Oppie continued. Delivery incomplete. Contract disputed. Cargo retained by recovery vessel pending review. Pending review by who? Kela asked. The relay doesn't specify. Kela snorted. In other words, nobody. Nuvei came onto the bridge a moment later, still dusty from the aft grid crawl space, fur ruffled, tail moving in short, angry cuts behind her. She had one ear damper hanging around her neck and a streak of dark grease across one cheek. How much cleared? Oppie hesitated. Nuvei pointed one claw at him. Don't optimize the number, say it. The launch retainer cleared when we departed Glasswick under contract. And? Dock movement fees and outbound registry handling consumed most of it. Nuvei stared at him. Oppie added, Enough remains for approximately 14% of a regulator. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Nuvei made a small sound that might have been laughter if laughter had been invented by someone trapped under a collapsing engine. 14%. Daro rubbed one hand over his jaw. Can you make that work? No. Can you make that almost work? No. Can you do anything useful with 14%? Nuvei's eyes narrowed. Define useful. Long enough to get us to the next job. One that pays. Nuvei looked toward the cargo bay feed and let out a low, annoyed hiss. Kela raised one hand without turning from the console. Since we've been flagged, I vote we leave before Glasswake decides to ask why the disputed cargo is still in our bay. Cara stood beside the scanner station with the black box sealed in its recorder case. Leaving doesn't remove the record. No, Daro agreed, but staying puts us at risk. We don't know what else they set up. Oppie turned toward Daro. A Port Authority query has opened on our birth record. Daro looked at Oppie. How serious? Automated. Low priority. Nuvei's ears tilted flat. Low priority. That's comforting until it's not. Can you delay it? Daro asked. Oppie paused. I can answer it with Nuvei's last repair report. Nuvei's head snapped toward him. Absolutely not. Your documentation is recent. It's incomplete. It says enough to cause a delay. Daro looked between them. Oppie, I can answer with partial maintenance documentation. Nuvei hissed. Daro pointed at her. You can hate him after we undock. I can multitask. Kela opened Glasswake traffic control and switched to her dock voice, polite, tired, and confident enough to imply she would make this a senior clerk's problem if she had to. Glasswake, lower ring, this is the second notice requesting departure clearance. A tired traffic voice answered through static. Second notice, you have an open berth query. We have several open problems. You want the query or the berth? A pause. Clarify. If you hold us here, the query stays attached to your lower ring backlog. If you clear us, it becomes transit review. Another pause. Daro looked at her. Kela muted the channel and shot Daro a confident smirk. Daro did not look reassured. Don't make it worse. The traffic channel clicked back. Second notice. Departure clearance granted. Transit review pending. Kela reopened the channel with professional brightness. Much appreciated, Glasswake. She cut the comm and started the undock sequence. Nuvei grabbed the back of the pilot chair as the ship's old clamps began to release. Don't stress the port drive. I never stress the port drive. Nuvei stared at her. Kela corrected herself. I won't stress the port drive right now. Nuvei's stare eased slightly. Better. Daro looked at the cargo bay feed. He had taken bad jobs before. Most, at least, had the decency to end when the cargo changed hands. This one was something else. Wyatt came up behind him. What do we call the thing in the cradle? Daro watched their assigned berth slide away on the forward display. A problem we haven't priced yet. Wyatt gave him a look, then nodded. Nuvei's voice came from behind them. Still not a regulator? Oppie checked the dead route trace again. Captain, the packet from the tug is still moving through relay space. I can't determine where it will surface. Daro didn't answer right away. Then the station began to fall behind. Kela glanced over her shoulder. So, where to? Somewhere they don't ask questions. Kela checked the route board. Robes Haven is 3 burns out if the port drive keeps working. Nuvei made a low sound. The port drive is barely working. Can it get us there? Or not? Nuvei's tail cut once. She shot Kela a look. Yes, if somebody doesn't get artistic with her flying. Kela turned back to the console. I'm wounded by the pattern of accusation. You're the pattern, Nuvei hissed. What you call flying is chaos to my well-ordered ship systems. The second notice left Glasswake on low burn. Ahead lay Rogue's Haven, where bad paperwork and worse cargo were the norm. Much later, after Wyatt had checked the cradle locks one more time and decided Nuvei would still complain, and Cara had isolated the black box. Oppie entered the cargo bay. The sealed cradle sat under a low work light, clamped to the deck hard enough that Nuvei had called it almost acceptable. Oppie rested one hand lightly on the damaged casing. Under the scoring and corrosion, one faint root mark remained, K19. He looked at it for 7 silent seconds. Then he opened a private log. Observation. Organic crews display repeated attraction to avoidable complications when those complications are paired with insufficient payment. A pause. Secondary observation. This crew has been placed inside a record it does not understand. Another pause. Correction. We have been placed inside a record we do not understand. He closed the log. Beyond the cargo bay, the second notice ran low and careful toward Robe's Haven.